The stranger in the rain. The night was heavy with rain, the kind of rain that drowned the city in silence. Streets were empty, lamps flickered weak light, and water rushed in streams along the sidewalks. Daniel, a man in his early 30s, walked alone. His coat was wet, his boots splashed in puddles, but his mind was far away. He had just finished a long shift at the factory, and all he wanted was to reach home and fall asleep. But then he heard something strange, a faint sound, like a sob mixed with the rain. He stopped. At first he thought it was just the wind, but then he heard it again. A cry, soft, broken, almost too weak to notice. Daniel turned his head, looking down a dark alley. There, in the shadows, he saw her. A figure was sitting against the wall, drenched, trembling. The faint glow of a street lamp touched her face, and Daniel froze. It was not a human face. Her skin was pale silver, almost shining in the rain, and her eyes glowed softly, like dying stars. Her clothes were torn, ripped as if she had been running from something. Daniel's breath caught. An alien. He had heard stories of them. Strange visitors, feared and admired, but he had never expected to meet one here, on a lonely street, in the middle of a storm. She looked up at him, weak and desperate. Then, to his shock, she crawled forward and dropped to her knees. Her voice trembled as she spoke in broken English. "Please, take me, as your servant. I cook, I clean, I obey. Please, keep me." Daniel stared, unable to move. Rain poured between them. Thunder rolled, yet her words cut through everything. He expected an alien to be proud, powerful, maybe even dangerous. But this one, she was begging. "Stand up," Daniel said, his voice uneasy. "You don't have to." But she shook her head quickly, eyes filled with fear. "No, no one wants me. I am abandoned. I have nothing. Please, let me serve you. I will stay silent." Her words broke something inside him. He saw the way she trembled, the way her hands clutched the ground as if she expected rejection. Daniel felt an ache in his chest. She was more than just strange. She was lost, shattered. For a moment he thought about walking away. This was not his problem. She was not his responsibility. Bringing an alien home could be dangerous. If anyone saw, questions would be asked. Maybe worse. But then she lifted her face again. In her eyes there was no pride, no anger, only sorrow. The kind of sorrow that came from being left behind too many times. Daniel sighed deeply. "All right," he said, his voice low. "Come with me." She blinked, as if she couldn't believe what she heard. Slowly, carefully, she rose to her feet. She was taller than him, elegant even in her broken state, but she kept her head low, as though afraid to stand too high. Daniel pulled his coat tighter and turned toward his small apartment. The alien followed, footsteps light, almost silent, like a shadow in the rain. As they walked, Daniel kept glancing back. She moved carefully, never speaking, never questioning. Every time their eyes met, she quickly looked down again. When they reached his building, Daniel unlocked the door and motioned for her to enter. She hesitated at the threshold, then whispered, "Thank you, human." Her voice was soft, almost broken, but in it Daniel heard a strange mix of relief and pain. Inside, his apartment was simple, barely 2 rooms, a small kitchen, and a couch. Nothing special. He had lived alone for years, and silence had always been his only companion. But tonight, silence was broken by the quiet steps of a stranger who did not belong here. She stood near the door, dripping water onto the floor, looking around with wide eyes. Her silver hair clung to her face, and her torn clothes made her look even fragile. Daniel grabbed a towel and handed it to her. She took it slowly, bowing her head. "Sit down," he said, pointing at the couch. She obeyed instantly, sitting with her hands on her knees, as if waiting for his next order. Daniel frowned. This was not right. She was not a servant. She was a living being. But he could see it. She truly believed she had no other value left. For a long moment they sat in silence, rain tapping against the windows. Finally Daniel asked, "What's your name?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Lyra." "Lyra," Daniel repeated, the name strange on his tongue. "Why were you out there? Who abandoned you?" Her eyes darkened and she shook her head. "I cannot say. Please do not ask. Just let me serve." Daniel leaned back, unsure what to do. But one thing was clear. This night had changed his life. He didn't know who Lyra truly was, or why she had been left in the rain, but deep inside, he knew her story carried more danger and more sorrow than she allowed herself to speak. And as thunder rolled outside, Daniel realized something. This was only the beginning. The House of Silence. The storm outside raged through the night, but inside Daniel's small apartment, silence filled the air. Lyra sat still on the couch, her silver hair dripping onto the floor, her eyes fixed on nothing. She looked like a statue, obedient, waiting, almost afraid to breathe too loudly. Daniel moved around the kitchen, making tea, trying to calm his racing thoughts. He kept glancing at her, not knowing what to say. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. Alien, yes, but not like the powerful creatures shown on news reports or rumors from distant cities. She was broken, fragile, and lost. When he placed a cup of tea in front of her, she looked at it with confusion, as if she didn't know whether she was allowed to touch it. "It's for you," Daniel said quietly. She hesitated, then bowed her head before lifting the cup. She sipped slowly, both hands holding it carefully as though it were something sacred. For the first time, Daniel noticed her hands were scarred, faint burns and marks that looked old. What had she endured? After a long silence, Lyra spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is warm." Daniel gave a small nod. "You can rest here tonight. Tomorrow, we'll figure something out." Her eyes widened, almost in fear. "No," she said quickly, shaking her head. "I will work. I clean. I cook. I do everything. Please, do not send me away." Daniel frowned. "I'm not sending you away. You don't have to do anything right now. Just rest." But she pressed her hands tightly together, her voice trembling. "If I do nothing, I am nothing. If I stay silent and serve, maybe I can stay." Her words hit him harder than the storm outside. She believed her worth was only in obedience. What had her people done to her? Daniel didn't push her with questions. He saw the fear in her eyes, the way she avoided speaking of her past. He decided to wait. The next morning, Daniel woke to the sound of movement. When he stepped into the kitchen, he stopped in surprise. The small space, usually messy, was spotless. The sink was empty, dishes stacked neatly, the floor shining. On the table, simple breakfast was prepared, eggs, bread, and a strange mix of herbs he didn't even know he had in his cupboard. Lyra stood by the counter, her hands folded, eyes lowered. She had found one of his old shirts and wore it like a dress, sleeves hanging loose. "I cleaned," she said softly. "I cooked. Please, let me stay." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "You didn't have to do all this." Her eyes lifted for a second, searching his face, then quickly dropped again. "I must. It is the only way." He sat at the table, tasting the food. It was simple, but somehow better than he could ever make. She stood the whole time, watching quietly, waiting for any sign of rejection. "You can sit," Daniel said finally. "You don't have to stand there." But she didn't move. "Servants do not sit with their master." The words made Daniel's chest tighten. He wasn't her master. He wasn't anyone's master, but he could see that in her world she had been taught to believe she was less. Days passed, and the pattern grew. Lyra never rested. She cleaned, cooked, organized every corner of the apartment. When Daniel tried to stop her, she begged softly, "Please let me serve. Please." At night, he sometimes heard her whispering in the dark. Strange words in her alien tongue mixed with names. Once he heard her say in broken English, "Forgive me, Father. Forgive me, Mother." It made him wonder. Had she been abandoned by her own family? One evening, Daniel returned home earlier than usual. He found Lyra standing by the window, her hand pressed against the glass, looking out at the night sky. Her expression was heavy with longing, her glowing eyes filled with pain. When she realized he was there, she quickly stepped back and bowed. "Forgive me. I was not working." "You don't have to ask forgiveness," Daniel said firmly. "This is your home now." Her lips trembled, as if the word home was something too precious to believe. Then suddenly the lights in the apartment flickered. Daniel frowned. Power cut? But Lyra stiffened, her entire body tense. Her eyes glowed brighter, fear washing across her face. She whispered something in her language, then turned to him. "They are searching." Daniel froze. "Who?" She shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "Hunters. They come for me. They always come." Outside, thunder rumbled again, but this time it wasn't only the storm. Strange sounds echoed in the distance, low hums, almost mechanical. Daniel looked out the window. In the far distance, faint lights moved across the sky. Not lightning, not airplanes. His heart pounded. Whoever had abandoned her was now trying to find her. That night, the silence in the apartment was no longer calm, such that it was heavy, full of dread. Daniel sat awake, watching the door, listening for sounds outside. Lyra sat on the floor near the window, her arms wrapped around her knees, whispering softly to herself. When Daniel finally spoke, his voice was low but steady. "Who are they? Why do they want you back?" Her face was pale, her eyes shimmering with fear. "Because I refused. Because I am not what they wanted me to be." Daniel leaned forward. "Refused what?" She shook her head quickly. "I cannot tell. If I speak, it will bring danger to you. Please, let me stay silent." Daniel saw the terror in her eyes. He didn't press further. But deep inside, he knew the truth was darker than he imagined. As the night went on, one thing became clear. Lyra's past was not finished with her, and now, because he had taken her in, it was no longer finished with him either. And for the first time, Daniel realized he wasn't just protecting a stranger. He was standing in the path of something far bigger, something that could change both their lives forever. The past revealed. The nights grew longer, heavier, after Lyra's warning. Daniel felt it in the air, the uneasiness, the silence that was no longer peaceful. Every time the lights flickered or a shadow passed the window, he caught himself tightening his fists, waiting for the unknown hunters she had spoken of. Lyra kept working, almost like a ghost moving through his small apartment. She cooked, cleaned, folded, fixed, and always stayed quiet. But sometimes, when she thought Daniel was asleep, her mask slipped. He could hear her whispering in the alien tongue, soft prayers or broken words filled with pain. One night, Daniel decided he couldn't let it continue. He sat at the table, watching her prepare food with careful hands. "Lyra," he said softly, "you can't carry this alone. If you trust me, tell me what they want. Why are they hunting? And you?" Her hands froze on the plate. For a long moment she didn't move. Then she placed the food down, turned, and looked at him. Her glowing eyes were heavy with secrets. "I should not speak," she whispered, "but you gave me shelter. You gave me warmth. Maybe you deserve to know." She sat across from him, shoulders trembling. The storm outside rattled the windows, thunder rolling like a drumbeat to her story. "I was born," she began slowly, "to a house of power. My people, they are proud. They demand obedience, perfection, silence, especially from daughters." Daniel listened, his chest tightening. Her voice carried weight, each word cutting like a blade. "My father was a commander. My mother, a council speaker. I was trained since childhood to obey. I was told my worth was not my voice, not my mind, but my silence. To serve without question, to bow without thought. They said loyalty was everything. Her hands clenched. But one day they gave me an order I could not follow. Daniel leaned closer. What kind of order? Her voice broke. They wanted me to bind myself, to kneel before a man I had never chosen, to swear life as his servant wife, to obey until death. I refused. I said no. Daniel's eyes widened. And for that, they cast you out? Lyra nodded, tears brimming. In my people's eyes, a daughter who refuses is not a daughter. She is nothing, abandoned, worthless. I was marked as traitor to family, my name erased. They left me alone, to die. Her words hung heavy in the room. Daniel felt anger rise in his chest. The thought of a world that erased its own children for refusing obedience made his fists tremble. And the hunters? He asked carefully. Lyra's eyes darkened. They are sent to ensure I do not rise again, to make sure silence is my only end. They will not stop. Daniel leaned back, staring at her. So you believed the only way to survive was to beg, to serve, to obey. Her lips trembled. She nodded. If I make myself small, maybe no one will see me. If I give everything, maybe someone will keep me. He shook his head. That's not living, Lyra. That's chains without metal. For a moment, silence stretched between them. The storm outside had softened, but inside, the air was still thick. Then suddenly, Lyra's head snapped up. Her glowing eyes sharpened. They are closer. Daniel froze. What? She rose quickly, moving to the window. Her hand hovered in the air, sensing something unseen. Their signal. I can feel it. They search the city. Daniel's pulse raced. He stepped beside her, looking out into the night. Faint lights moved in the sky again, cold and steady. Not planes, not stars, hunters. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He sat near the door with an old wrench in his hand, the only thing that felt like a weapon. Lyra sat in silence across the room, her knees pulled close, her body tense. In the stillness, Daniel studied her face. She looked so young, yet carried centuries of sorrow in her eyes. She was an alien, yes, but in her brokenness, he saw something human, something painfully familiar, the pain of rejection, the fear of not belonging. Lyra, he said quietly, you don't have to bow anymore. Not here, not to me, not to anyone. Her gaze lifted slowly, as if those words were harder to believe than the storm outside. If I stop bowing, she whispered, who am I? Daniel's heart ached. He didn't have the answer, but he knew one thing. She was not nothing, and he would not let anyone treat her as nothing again. The following morning, the city streets felt different. Daniel noticed strangers in dark coats, moving in pairs, scanning with small devices that glowed faint blue. They were not locals. They were searching. When he returned home, Lyra was waiting near the window, her eyes full of fear. They are here, she whispered. The hunters have come. Daniel locked the door, his jaw tight. Let them come, he muttered. But inside, his mind was as racing. How could he, one man with nothing but a small apartment and a stubborn heart, stand against soldiers from the stars? He didn't know, but when he looked at Lyra, trembling yet still standing, he knew one thing for certain. He would not give her up. Not to them, not to anyone. The hunters arrive. The city had changed. Daniel could feel it in every street he walked. Strangers with cold eyes and heavy coats wandered the corners, their movements too precise, too watchful. Devices in their hands flickered with blue light, scanning the air, humming softly. To most, they looked like travelers, but Daniel knew they were not travelers. They were hunters. He returned home quickly that evening, locking the door behind him. Lyra stood near the window, her pale silver skin glowing faintly in the dim light. Her eyes followed the streets below with the quiet fear of someone who had been chased too long. "They are close," she whispered. "I can feel their signal. They search every shadow." Daniel's chest tightened. He was only one man, with no weapons, no soldiers, no power. But he could not forget the night she had knelt in the rain, begging only for a place to exist. No one deserved to live in chains of fear. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "If they come, you stay behind me, no matter what." Her eyes widened. "They will kill you. You cannot stand against them." Daniel's voice was steady. "Maybe. But they will not take you, not while I breathe." That night, silence filled the small apartment. Rain tapped against the glass, but beneath it Daniel thought he heard something else. Low hums, almost like machines in the distance. He gripped the old wrench in his hand, heart pounding. At midnight the door shook. A knock, loud, heavy, not of neighbors. Daniel rose slowly. Lyra froze, her breath sharp. The knock came again, followed by a voice, cold, sharp, carrying authority. "Human, open the door. You shelter what does not belong to you." Daniel swallowed hard, his grip tightening on the wrench. "Stay quiet," he whispered to Lyra. The voice came again. "Give her to us. She is property of the house. Refusal means death." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head desperately, whispering, "Do not open, please, they will kill you." But Daniel stepped toward the door, each step heavier than the last. His heart thundered, but his mind was clear. He would not hand her over. When he opened the door, 3 figures stood in the hall. Their faces were pale like Lyra's, but their eyes burned with cold fire. They wore armor hidden beneath cloaks, and in their hands, long rods hummed with blue energy. The leader stepped forward, scanning Daniel with disdain. "Move aside, human. She belongs to us." Daniel planted his feet, his voice low but firm. "She belongs to no one." The hunter's lip curled. "You dare speak against the house? She is caste property. She has no rights. She is nothing." Daniel raised the wrench. His hand shook, but his eyes didn't waver. "She's not nothing. She is someone, and you're not taking her." For a moment, silence burned between them. Then the hunter laughed coldly. "You think a fragile human can stand against us?" Daniel tightened his grip. "Try me." Behind him, Lyra's heart raced. She could not understand this man, this human who owed her nothing, yet stood against death for her. Her people had cast her out like dirt, but here was someone who saw her as more than silence, more than obedience. Tears streamed down her face, but inside, something long buried began to stir. A spark of dignity she thought she had lost forever. The hunters moved forward. Their weapons hummed, blue light crackling in the dark hall. Daniel's chest pounded, fear threatening to crush him, but he refused to step aside. Then, something unexpected happened. Lyra rose from behind him. She stepped forward, her eyes glowing brighter than ever before. Her voice, trembling yet strong, rang out in the hall. "No more?" The hunters froze. Their eyes widened. They had expected silence, obedience, weakness. But the daughter who had been cast out now stood tall, her back straight, her voice defying everything she had been taught. Daniel turned, shocked. Lyra's body shimmered faintly, her silver skin glowing with a soft, radiant light. She was no longer the broken figure he had found in the rain. For the first time, she looked like who she truly was, a woman of strength. The leader's voice broke the moment. "So, the traitor dares speak. Then your death will be here." The hunters raised their weapons. Blue energy sparked, humming louder. Daniel raised his wrench, ready to fight even though he knew it was hopeless. His only thought was to protect her, even if it cost him his life. But then the floor itself trembled. Lyra lifted her hand, and the faint light around her surged. Daniel stepped back in awe. She had powers, buried deep, hidden beneath chains of fear, and now, in this moment of danger, they awakened. The blue energy from the hunters' weapons flickered, sputtered. Sparks burst as if something disrupted their flow. The hunters staggered, shouting in confusion. Lyra's voice rang again, clear and sharp. "I am not nothing. I am not your servant. I am not your slave. I am free." The hallway shook with a burst of light. The hunters fell back, weapons failing in their hands. Daniel shielded his eyes, his heart pounding in disbelief. When the glow faded, the hunters staggered to their feet, rage in their eyes. But fear, too. They had not expected resistance. "This is not finished," the leader spat, retreating into the shadows. "The house will return, and you, human, will suffer for this defiance." They vanished into the night, their steps echoing down the hall. Silence returned, heavy and sharp. Daniel turned slowly to Lyra. She stood tall, her body trembling, her face streaked with tears, but her eyes burned with strength. You saved us," Daniel whispered. Lyra shook her head. "No, you saved me first. Tonight I remembered who I am. But the house will come again, stronger." Daniel stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Then let them come, because this time you won't face them alone." For the first time since he met her, Lyra's lips curved into the faintest smile. It was fragile, but real. The storm outside had passed, but Daniel knew the true storm was only beginning. The choice that changed everything, the days after the hunter's visit, were tense, like the city itself held its breath. Daniel could not shake their final words. The house will return. He knew it wasn't a threat, it was a promise. Lyra stayed quiet, though her silence was different now. It was not the silence of obedience, but of thought. Since the night she stood against the hunters, something inside her had changed. Her shoulders were straighter, her eyes brighter, and sometimes Daniel caught her standing at the window, whispering softly to herself, not in fear, but in determination. Still, shadows lingered. Every evening strangers roamed the streets. The blue lights of their devices flickered in alleys. The hunters were not finished, they were gathering. One evening, Daniel returned home to find Lyra waiting by the table, her face pale. "They come tonight," she said. His chest tightened. "How do you know?" "I can feel their signal, stronger, many ships. They bring not only hunters, but the commander." Her voice trembled. "He will not stop until I kneel again, or until I am dead." Daniel clenched his fists. "Then we fight." But Lyra shook her head slowly. "You cannot fight them all. If I stay, you will die. If I return, at least you will live." Daniel stepped closer, his voice sharp. "No, I didn't take you in. I didn't stand at that door, just to wow. At you surrender now." Her eyes shimmered with tears. "You do not understand. The house does not forgive. They will burn everything to erase me. You cannot stand against them." Daniel looked into her eyes, steady and unyielding. "Maybe I can't, but together, maybe we can." For the first time, Lyra faltered. Together. The words struck her heart like light breaking through darkness. That night, the sky above the city split with light. Alien ships descended silently, their shadows stretching across the streets. People below scattered in fear, thinking it was just another storm. But Daniel and Lyra knew better. The door to the apartment shook violently. This time, it was no knock. It was a command. "Open, traitor! The commander demands her return." Daniel stood tall, wrench in hand, though he knew it was useless against the power outside. Behind him, Lyra stepped forward, her eyes glowing with quiet fire. "I will not kneel," she whispered. The door burst open. Hunters flooded in, armor gleaming, weapons glowing with blue light. And behind them entered a tall figure draped in black. His face was cold, carved from stone, his voice deep and cruel. "So the abandoned daughter still breathes." His eyes burned into Lyra. "You disgrace the house with your defiance. Kneel now, or both you and your human protector will die screaming." The room filled with the hum of weapons. Daniel stood in front of Lyra, his voice steady. "You'll have to go through me first. The commander sneered. Then so be it. The hunters moved, raising their weapons. But before they could strike, the air itself shifted. Lyra stepped past Daniel, her hand raised. Her body glowed with a radiant silver light, stronger than before. Her voice rang through the room, clear, powerful, unbroken. I am not your servant. I am not your property. I am not your silence. I am Lyra, daughter of the house you tried to erase, and I choose my own path. The energy around her exploded. The hunters' weapons sparked violently, blue beams shattering in their hands. The commander staggered, his cloak whipping in the sudden storm of light. Daniel shielded his eyes, stunned, as the small apartment trembled under the force of her awakening. The commander roared. You dare defy me? Lyra's voice cut like steel. Yes, I dare. The hunters rushed forward, but Daniel leaped in their way, swinging his wrench with raw fury. Metal struck armor, sparks flying. He was outmatched, but he didn't stop. For every blow that fell on him, he rose again, refusing to fall. And behind him, Lyra unleashed the power she had hidden all her life. Light burst from her hands, waves of silver energy that tore through the hunters' weapons and sent them crashing to the ground. The commander staggered back, his cold eyes narrowing in fury. You cannot win. Even if you kill us, the house will never stop hunting you. Lyra stepped forward, her light burning brighter. Then let them try. They will not find the same broken girl they cast out. They will find me, and I will not bow. The commander snarled, but for the first time fear flickered in his eyes. He signaled retreat, and the hunters pulled back, dragging their broken weapons. The night swallowed them, their shadows fleeing into the sky. Silence returned. The apartment was wrecked, the air still buzzing with energy, but they were alive. Daniel dropped the wrench, breathing hard, bruises forming across his arms. Lyra knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she touched his wounds, tears running down her face. You risked everything for me. He looked at her, tired but smiling faintly. You risked everything too. That makes us even. Lyra's tears fell onto his hand, glowing faintly in the silver light still surrounding her. For the first time she wasn't the servant, the abandoned, the silent. She was free. And Daniel, the simple man who found her in the rain, had given her that freedom by standing beside her when no one else would. Outside, the night was calm again. The storm had passed. Lyra looked out the broken window, her voice soft but strong. The house will come again, but next time I will not hide. I will not beg. I will not kneel, because I am not alone anymore. Daniel stood beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. No, you're not. For a long moment, they stood together, staring into the dark sky where the enemy had fled. 2 lives, 1 human, 1 alien, bound now by choice, by courage, and by a fight they both knew was far from over. But tonight, one truth shone brighter than the stars. The abandoned alien beauty had found her voice, her strength, and her place, not as a servant, but as herself.